Welcome to the Porn Reboot podcast, where you get practical tips to gaining control over your porn or sex addiction. We help ambitious men end their out-of-control sexual behavior with pornography, sex, and masturbation so that you can maximize your life, perform at your potential, and remain in control in the driver's seat, which is where you have to be in order to gain or maintain the success you want in life. I'm your host, J.K. Emezi, certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach. Welcome to the episode.
Brother, today's episode might bring up some strong emotions for you. I'm warning you right now. It might bring up anger. It might bring up shame. It might make you think that, you know what, JK is a dangerous guy. I don't think he's the person that I want to learn from when it comes to controlling my out-of-control behavior. I think he's an extremist of sorts. And that's okay. Whatever emotion comes up, it's fine. However, my hope is that this episode brings about some self-examination, some introspection, because this episode is about your happiness and why you choose unhappiness over happiness. For years, I chose unhappiness over happiness, and I did not know I was doing it because every choice I was making, I was convinced, and everybody around me was confirming that I was making that choice in order to be happy, until I rebooted. You know, the other day I was speaking to one of my private clients, and we were having a conversation. This guy's in his late 20s, and he's building a business. And while we were talking about his business and where he would be in a few years, I ended up mentioning to him that at 40 years old, I had won. And he was like, what you mean by you've won? By won, I mean that when I was in my late 20s, and this is what's most memorable to me, I started experiencing, and you may be experiencing this or have experienced this, a lot of pressure from very strong forces around me to conform to certain things and make certain decisions. One of them was to get married because I had been with my girlfriend for over 2 years. So there was some rule, apparently, that if you're with somebody for more than 2 years, then the next question is, when are you going to get married? And all of these things really bothered me because I was like, since when was our life so process-driven? I do know that we're born, and I do know that we die. Where is this process of you got to go to school, then you got to go to high school, then you got to go to university, then you got to get married, then you got to have a kid, you got to get a good job, buy a house, get a mortgage, get locked down by your wife. There are so many rules. And where did these come from? I pushed back against these things. Well, before that, let me just talk about the pressure, because I know some of you might relate to this. There was the pressure to get married. There was the pressure to have kids. I also saw my friends getting married, getting traditional jobs, buying homes. They looked very, very happy. But I resisted it. And the reason why I resisted it is based on something that I teach clients right now. Please pay attention. When you are making long-term decisions that will impact your life, decisions which they seem that they're going to make you happy right now, I want you to think clearly about your long-term happiness. This is easier for a man within the program who's rebooting to do because he has defined his reboots for himself. So he knows what will make him happy in the future. Think of your long-term happiness and ask yourself, if I make this decision, which will be conformist, which everybody will be happy about, which I might be happy about, what is it going to look like 10 years or 20 years from now in terms of my happiness? If you do not think that far and you are just hoping, which means that the future of this is completely out of your control, like you have zero say in it, brother, I do not suggest you make that decision. When I rebooted, thankfully, and I was dealing with all of these pressures in my late 20s, like some of you might be in your 30s and 40s and dealing with your own version of it. When I started dealing with it, I was asking myself, how is this going to affect my long-term happiness? Okay, cool. Have kids. Nah, I want to wait till I am established financially. That way, I don't have to be like my dad and mom who were not present because they were working all the time. And while they were not present, fucked up things were happening to myself and my sisters because they were out there. They chose to have children before they were financially ready. And people are still doing it. Why? Because till today, people are still saying there is no right time. if you are a man who's being pressured by somebody in your family right now to put a ring on it and get married, but you're like, but I'm not financially where I want to be. Tell them, like, I'm trying to get my finances together, and hear what they have to say. They will tell you things like, you don't want to wait too long because you don't want to be an old man going to pick up your kids. I love that one. It's just a blanket statement, like it's an assumption that you will look old and feel old, and it will be somehow embarrassing to have kids, or that you don't want to be 70 years old and playing catch with your kids. Who said you have to be 70 years old and broken? Shit, who said you even have to be 70? What if you're 40? What if you're 50? Why is that so bad? Because you're not conforming. Like, you don't want to feel awkward at 50 going to pick up your kids from kindergarten, because they're going to be younger men there. Listen, if you're 50 years old and picking your kids up from kindergarten and you feel self-conscious about it, then you fucked up. You're 50 years old. You shouldn't be giving a shit. But that's one of the things they will say. Another thing they'll say is, well, her biological clock, what are you going to do if she wants kids? I remember very clearly, it was more than 10 years ago, my mom telling me, well, what are you going to do, JK, when her biological clock starts ticking? Don't waste the woman's time. Don't waste her time. I was like, you didn't even ask the woman herself if she want to have kids. I said, well, if I'm not where I need to be financially, like if she tells me that tomorrow, then I guess it's not going to work out. And my mom was like, oh, that's ridiculous, JK. That sounds so ridiculous. Why do you like to say ridiculous things like that, JK? Huh? Like, it was like my mom's brain glitched because I had dared to say that if I was not established in the thing that was going to lead to my long-term happiness, and thus affect the long-term happiness of those who are closest to me, like a wife and child in the future, that if I was not on the same page as that, like, I was ridiculous. But this was the view held by many people. Don't get me wrong. People will hear your plans and it will make sense to them, but because it does not fit into their worldview, which I will talk about very specifically, I'm going to give you the 5 to 6 reasons why all of this actually happens so that you can avoid it. People will hear you out and they'll be like, that's a good idea. And then they will promptly do what everybody else is doing. The same thing works for investing, for businesses. Oh, well, why don't you just buy a house? You need to buy a house. It's a great first investment. You need to own the home that you're living in. And I was like, well, in the long term, I see a lot of people, I didn't understand much of it back then, but I see a lot of people just talking about their mortgage and the house. I see people stuck by a mortgage. They can't move. They can't adjust. They can't do any of those things. So what's your plan? Well, I think my plan is to, instead of buying a home for myself, I'll invest in rental properties. And eventually, I will take the income from those rental properties and buy a home for myself. But I will keep buying rental properties and having people pay me. Just people just thought it was the craziest thing. Obviously, real investors didn't think it was a crazy thing. But everybody just thought it was ridiculous. Like, why are you talking like that, bro? You're only 20-something years old. You should be buying a house and living your life and making money. But that's what I thought. Now, let's jump into it, gentlemen. You get the gist of where I'm going with this. There are 2 things that take away from your happiness. And interestingly enough, these 2 things are the things that were promised to actually give you happiness. And I will tell you why you keep choosing these 2 things. The first one is your societal programming. And your societal programming would be things like things that your culture, things that your religion, things that your family, even your country have told you you're expected to do. One of those things are the things with relationships that I mentioned. But the same extends to your finances. It extends to the way you raise your children. It extends to the political views that you take, where you live, and a lot of other things. The second thing that leads to your unhappiness is your biological wiring. And it's what I call your useless biological wiring. What's useless biological wiring? It's things which existed purely for our survival, which we no longer need in today's world, but we still allow ourselves to be run by. And because we allow ourselves to be run by that, corporations take advantage of it to make money from us. An example would be your sex drive. You have the drive to impregnate every attractive woman that you see. Now, you were never taught how to control that, so you use pornography. The industry, known as the porn industry, hijacked that desire and takes your attention. You might be like, well, I don't spend money. No, it takes your attention, and eventually it will take money out of your pocket. But it just needs your attention, because when you are paying with your attention for it, it allows somebody else to pay with their money. They need the traffic from your eyeballs in order for them to grow. Trust me, there's somebody out there who's still paying for it. It has allowed for the proliferation of things like OnlyFans. So much has happened. When it comes to your biological wiring, we all have a desire to consume a lot of sugar. But this is useless wiring because it comes from a time when sugar was rare. So when you found something when you were foraging and it was sugary, you ate as much of it as you could because it was glucose. It was instant energy for you to survive and hunt and run. It was also something that could be converted into fats eventually that would keep you warm during the cold winter nights. But corporations have also packaged that and they sell it to us. And we can keep going with many things. I'll give you one when it comes to relationships, which is jealousy. Jealousy is actually a useless emotion overall. It is useful for one or two things. Here's the only thing that jealousy is useful for. Jealousy is useful if you see somebody that's your peer doing better than you financially, or you see them in control of their sexual behavior and you get jealous. You're just like, man, like that's just, I'm just jealous that guy has that. Like, it's a very strong emotion. Like, he has that and I don't. I'm going to find a way to get that for myself. That's jealousy. Envy is very different. Envy means that you want bad things to happen to that person. Envy means you want bad things to happen to that person and you want to take that person's shit. But jealousy, aside from using it as a motivator, for everything else is very detrimental. You're hanging out with your wife or your girlfriend and you see a notification comes up from Chad from work and there are like multiple hearts on it. Or Chad from work leaves her 3 missed calls at 1 a.m. While it is suspicious and it's something that you should probably ask about, if this rage comes up within you, blinding rage where you want to fucking kill Chad, where you think she's cheating on you, you simply need to understand that that is old wiring that served a purpose. Yes, there was a time thousands of years ago where Chad would have to die. But that was when there was scarce women in your tribe. You lived in a tribe, there were very few women, or maybe the women matched the men, but most of them were old or most of them were underage, which leaves a very small pool of fertile women. And then there are all the men, because both the old men and the younger men and the middle-aged men had a claim to those women. It was only the alpha who could get with those women. What happened to everybody else who couldn't get with those women? Well, you just weren't going to procreate and your genes were not going to move forward. So of course there was jealousy to make sure that you didn't let anybody take over your genes. Human survival mechanisms. These two things, gentlemen, I hope you're still with me. These are the two things that are enemies of your long-term happiness, because if you constantly choose them over long-term happiness, you will not be happy in the long term. So if we know these things, if we know that too much sugar is bad for us, or that pornography is bad for us, or that we shouldn't be so jealous, or that we shouldn't make frivolous decisions right now based on peer pressure or family pressure when we don't want to because it's going to make us unhappy, why do we do these things anyway? Here's why. And gentlemen, my brother who's listening to this is where you take notes. The first one is control over others. As human beings, we have a very strong desire to control other people. You will notice that the government will take advantage of anything, for example, to get into your business and tell you what to do. You see it in schools, you see it in corporations, you see it in religions, you see it in families, you see it in the media, and then you see something called rules. Where do rules come from? Rules come from our very natural inclination to control things. Now, rules are good. They keep us from being savages. They keep other people from being hurt. Have you noticed that there's a tendency, once we start establishing rules, to make more and more and more rules? Well, you've got to be aware of this. That's the first thing. Be aware that there is a desire to control other people. And anytime you become a part of some sort of institution, understand there will be rules and regulations which will get tighter and tighter and tighter. If you're a real estate investor like I am, you already know there are rules and regulations, and human beings will keep adding to it. If you are a married man, you've probably noticed that there are rules. Before you were married, there weren't that many rules, or there were no rules when you were dating. The moment you become part of an institution, it's almost as if naturally the people within that, oh, we're married, so that means that now you can't be going out with your buddies. That's not what a married man does. You can't do this, you can't do this, and it's seen as something that is so normal. What you don't see is that it impacts your long-term happiness. Be wary of it. The second one is conformity. And conformity is exactly what it is. We are communal creatures. We all live in communities of one. You live in a city, you live in a state, you live in a county, you live in a suburb, you live where other human beings are. And even if you don't, you do go out and spend time with other human beings in their own communities. But this communal tendency leads to a very strong desire to look and act like the people in our community. So we try to dress the way people dress. We try to walk in the direction people are walking. We are doing the things that other people are doing. We have to choose sides, whether it's in politics or one thing or the other. And any time you try to do something that is outside of that conformist societal norm, you will immediately have people look at you. If you've watched the movie The Matrix, where Neo interacts, I believe, and I might be getting this wrong, with the woman in the red dress, and suddenly everybody in the Matrix just pays attention to him, that's an example of that. If everybody is walking on the sidewalk and there is no traffic in the middle of the road, and you choose to walk in the middle of the road, everybody is going to stare at you. Why? You're walking in the same direction, but you just choose not to walk on the sidewalk. And let's say the road is closed off and there's no traffic. Why is everybody looking at you? Because immediately you've chosen to be nonconformist, and that puts pressure on you to get back on the sidewalk. But sometimes, in fact, many times, the sidewalk leads to unhappiness. But it doesn't matter because the urge to not stand out is very strong. And as I break these down, brother, you'll start to realize that our useless biological wiring, it overlaps with a lot of our societal programming. It is so important to learn how to break away from this. The next reason why you choose unhappiness over your long-term happiness is because of security. As human beings, we have a very strong need for security. In fact, most people listening to this are men. I want you to know too that women have a stronger need for security than men. And if you do not understand this, you're going to be in big trouble. There's a reason why women will lock you down in a relationship and have a tendency to set a lot more rules. It is simply because of their need for security. There's a reason why the courts are favorable towards women in the West when it comes to divorce proceedings. It is because the woman's collective desire for security is very, very powerful. It is also powerful politically, but that's a different topic. Now, there are two types of security. I have to make this clear. There's what I call internal security, and there's external security. External security is not good. Internal security is good. So internal security is what you do that is common sense in order to protect yourself, but it is within your control. An example of some things that constitutes internal security are having an investment portfolio that's going to take care of your retirement, or having a financial emergency fund, or having an insurance policy or health insurance, or having an alarm system and cameras for your home, or having a safe in your home where you keep valuable things. That's good. Those are smart, common sense things to do, but not many people do them. External security is security that's promised by someone else or an entity that is external of you. You don't have much control over this person or this entity. Here's an example. The most common one is a woman says that she's going to marry you, and because you put this ring on her finger, she's never going to divorce you. That is external security. There is no guarantee that she's going to stay with you, and you can't force her to do anything. Another example would be you look at your government is in debt. Your government is making bad decisions with taxpayer money, but you choose to depend on this government to pay you Social Security in your old age. There's nothing wrong with that. It still might, but it's still external security. Are you starting to see how we think about our long-term happiness? Let me tell you something as I continue this, or rather before I continue with this. Many of your parents, if you look at your parents, they had a lot of external security. They were not thinking the right way about their long-term happiness. They were thinking about their long-term happiness because they were from that generation, but at the same time, they were making little mistakes like this, like choosing external security over internal security. Some of them were smart, and they may not have messed up in this area, but they might have in another area. The next thing that causes you to choose unhappiness over long-term happiness is your need for validation. And there are two of them. There's emotional validation, and then there is social validation. Emotional validation is also what I call drama. I've often described drama as a need for emotional validation. That's if you're a person who needs some sort of emotional stimuli all the time. You need to feel angry or outraged about something. Even if you're not doing it in person, you're doing it online. I know people who will only get outraged if, let's say, somebody says something they don't agree with about their culture, or somebody says something they don't agree with about their religion or their ethnicity or something like that. But you have this antenna that's looking for it. You can't resist getting emotional about it. The other day, I put up a video on my Facebook, and I put it up because sometimes when I put up posts about my routine or some of the people I have helped, I will get a random religious person, usually a Christian, just putting out a post saying something like, "Come to Jesus, JK," or "Come to Christ, JK." So one day when I had put up, this was last week, I'd put up a picture of myself meditating. It is something I do on a regular basis, and it's been very helpful for me. And this pastor, that's what his profile said, "Come to Christ, JK." So I put out a question to everybody who follows me and my friends, and I said, well, why is it that some Christians feel the need to just reach out to random people on the internet? This was not a client either, just followed me, I don't know who he is, and just tell them what they must do, like you must come to Christ. Now, I'm not somebody who's on the streets doing drugs. I am not somebody who is in prison. I am not somebody who is crying out for help. I am just a person who they see doing good, but they are upset or impacted by this because I am not doing it in the way they would. In this case, I'm not doing it through Christ. So I was curious. I was like, why aren't you on the streets talking to other people? Why is it that you see somebody who's having an impact and you have to tell him that, yeah, great job with your impact, but without Christ, it doesn't mean anything? Now, it led to a very engaging conversation with a lot of people. I'm very thankful for everybody who contributed to that conversation. But it also brought out a few very emotional people who I realized was simply seeking emotional validation. And I don't care how much you love Jesus or whether you are saved or not. I don't care. If you get upset that somebody asked that question and still doesn't get to see your point of view and goes like, that's cool, that's interesting, but I'll maintain my point of view, and that makes you upset, it means that you have an attachment to the emotions that come up when it's related to that type of topic. Some men are also in relationships, and you do not leave that relationship because you need that emotional validation as well. You will see it when people lose their shit. People will yell at the security officer. People will yell at the waitress because she brought the wrong order. Why do you need to shout at that person? That person didn't do anything bad to you. Usually they made a mistake, or usually they're doing something that might be a minor inconvenience to you, but they don't know it's a minor inconvenience to you. Instead, you release all your strong emotions on them. Why? A need for emotional validation. The next is a need for social validation. All of us want approval from someone. We want recognition. We want it from the internet. We want it from our parents, from our family, from our friends, from our kids. We love that feeling. It releases dopamine and other endorphins. But while it is a good thing and it's great to receive that validation, I encourage it for a lot of men in their early reboots to get validation in certain ways. But it's a problem when you start doing things you do not like in order to get that validation. Oh my goodness. Brother, please pay attention to this one. Don't be the guy who marries a particular kind of woman because you want your dad's approval. Don't go to school and get a degree. Don't make certain decisions because you want that approval. You know you don't want to do it, but you value the social validation. You know the dopamine hit is going to be huge. And you hope secretly that over the years, Your dad will keep giving you that validation. Your mom will keep doing, son, you made a good decision, son. You made a good decision to lock this one down. But the truth is, you were not ready to get married. You didn't want to, but you have fooled yourself. You've been scammed. You have been played. You thought that it is normal to do that. You thought that it is okay to have everybody's approval because you made this decision instead of yours. You thought that that's the way society works because nobody told you that you could do otherwise. See, the mindset I realized when I rebooted that most human beings have is that happiness is optional. That it's good if you have happiness. Listen to this. It's good if you have happiness, but if you're trying to have it in the long term, that's not realistic. Like happiness is just something that, it's nice if you have it, but if you don't, it's okay. This is a lie because you can set your life up so that 80 to 90% of it is happy. And I mean this as a fact. I don't know where this scam came from. This scam that it is impossible to be happy. I really don't know where it came from. That it's impossible, to prioritize your long-term happiness and live in a state of mostly happiness. Here's the final thing that keeps you, and I hope you're still taking note, that keeps you from long-term happiness. And this is the inability to be alone. Now, this varies depending on your personality type. If you're more of an introverted personality type, you can be alone. However, there is a danger to it because even introverts like myself need to interact with other people. And if you know how to be alone, but you're doing it to the extreme where you cannot interact with other people, then that aloneness becomes a negative thing. That becomes a place where you become a loner, where you start medicating with very destructive behaviors because you don't have any accountability. You don't step out. You start viewing the world as a dangerous place. Like, people are not good. People are going to hurt me. These groups of people are stupid. This is dumb. That is dumb. And your ego grows because you think that you're seeing things from some really different perspective. I give you an example. Like, everything I'm sharing with you here, you shouldn't listen to me if I was a loner. If I was a guy who didn't have a relationship, who didn't have friends, who didn't have businesses, and I was just a guy who turned on my podcast and I was running my mouth, you should be like, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like, there's no proof, JK. A lot of loners, I want to make this point, a lot of loners have a voice now because of the internet. There are also a lot of loners that promote these things. You will be surprised when you go out into the internet. Last night, I was doing some research on AI stuff, and there are literally influencers and individuals who are influential, who are loners, surrounded by loners. These are their friends. They haven't even seen each other's faces. And they were talking about different AI programs where you could get an AI girlfriend because all of these men had decided that they were never going to get into relationships and it wasn't worth the effort. Oh man, that was a rabbit hole that I started going down. I was like, you know what? I need to stop. So be very wary of being proud of your ability to be alone. Make sure you can still go out there and you can still interact with people. Make sure that you can still build relationships, healthy relationships with others. Now, on the flip side are the extroverted ones, those of you who can never be alone. Like, when you're alone for 3-4 days, you start feeling that something is wrong. And then you're either medicating with pornography or you're getting on chat sites or you need to hook up with somebody. There's always something like that. Some of you end up in and tolerate unhealthy relationships because you cannot be alone. It is critical for men to have the ability to be alone, completely alone and in solitude. I highly recommend that you develop this skill. I'm not saying be a loner. I'm saying that you can be alone, even if you're not in a relationship for a few years, and you are fine with that. So those are the few things that I have learned over the last, I would say, call it 18, 19 years, that keep men away from being happy. And I'll list them out again, just as a summary of this. And I appreciate those of you who've stayed with me thus far in the podcast episode. The two enemies of your long-term happiness are your useless biological wiring and your societal programming. And they are very insidious. They are embedded in every aspect of your life, and you rarely question them. However, there are also a few things that keep you choosing these two things over everything else, over your long-term happiness. And if you can question these things and bring them to your awareness and make them a part of your lifestyle reboot, things are going to be so much easier for you, and you're going to sustain your long-term happiness. One of them is security. The second one is your need to control others. The third is emotional validation. The fourth is social validation. The fifth is your inability to be alone. And the final one is conformity. Rebooting is designed to help you with your long-term happiness. Even within our system, there are men who do not understand this. There are men who say, pornography is getting in the way of my immediate happiness. Men who only focus on things that are getting in the way of their immediate happiness are likely to get back to another compulsive behavior or their compulsive behavior with pornography again in the future. Then you're going to turn around and you're going to blame your coach and go like, oh, his system doesn't work. His system doesn't work. But that's because you weren't willing to work on other areas of your reboot capital. You just wanted to control your behavior with pornography so that your wife wouldn't leave you, so that sex would be better with your wife, so that you could be more focused on work. And you thought that was where the story ended. I designed the Porn Reboot system to be a system that opens your eyes to the reality of the world so that you can be a man who walks in the middle of the road, not caring what other people think, so that you can actually win. And what is winning? Winning is not being better than other people. Winning is having long-term happiness on your own terms. And that is why I told that client at the beginning of this call that I mentioned that I had won at 40 years old, not because I am better than anybody. And when I talked about the strong emotions, the reason I said you might have strong emotions listening to this is because chances are you are still impacted by this societal programming and this biological wiring. And that might be impacting the way you hear this. At 40, I had navigated all of these 5 to 6 different things. I had become aware of them. Each time I wanted to do something, I was like, why am I doing it? Oh, I'm doing it to conform. Dangerous. Oh, why am I feeling this emotion towards my partner? Oh, this is drama. This is just me wanting to validate my own emotion. Oh, why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to do this or stay in this place? Oh, it's because I don't want to be alone. Oh, why am I about to buy into this? I'm about to spend a lot of money on this thing this person is selling me. Oh, it's because I am not ready to take responsibility for my internal security. I want external security because I'm being lazy. Internal security takes work, but I don't want to do it. And when you can think this clearly, oh my goodness, the quality of your life completely changes. Brother, you don't do this in a vacuum, and neither did I. I was not some unique individual that suddenly figured it out on my own. I had mentors. I had accountability partners. And remember, I have a group of friends, a group of close friends. We kept each other accountable to all these different things. You know, this summer, and I'll end with this summer, we were all traveling and we decided to travel. We're just like, we're going to travel this summer. And there are 5 of us. I had been in Southeast Asia where I got some business deals going on. And they were like, hey, we're going to go to Barcelona. Then we're going to go to Ibiza in Spain. After that, let's hit up a few of the Greek islands, Mykonos, Santorini, and let's end the trip over in Athens. And if you guys want to go to the Eastern Europe, we can do that as well. Everyone was like, say less, when do you need us to be there? And we planned the entire thing out. We were on a catamaran, which is just like a big boat, outside Santorini, Greece. And my best friend, Vincent, started crying. And by crying, I mean tears dropping down his face. And when we ended up talking about it, it was tears of happiness. It was tears of happiness because everybody there was in their late 30s. And we had all chosen long-term happiness consciously. Some of you have met my friend Prashant, who has traveled to like 140-something countries and is going to do 2 rounds of it in his lifetime. Extraordinary human being. Some of you have met my friend Andrew, who recently became the Dating Reboot coach. I don't think anybody else has met Vincent, my business partner in real estate, but some of you guys will meet another brother, Vivek, who'll be doing the financial reboot program. All of them are multimillionaires. All of them are under the age of 40. I was the oldest and I just turned 40. And he was saying that, do you know how difficult it is to get a group of grown men in their late 30s to show up at the drop of a dime? Drop of a dime means 30 days notice, and travel to multiple countries. Like, he's like, do you know how difficult it is? And to do that for weeks and weeks. He's like, we did something right. And that is something to be happy about. We proved it. Now, there were other people who were part of our group, and they chose the social programming or the biological wiring path. And maybe they're happy, maybe they're not. We have some details about that. But what I do know is that we chose different. And the point of this story is not to flex on you. It's not to bring up a negative emotion for you, brother. It's to let you know that we're born and we die. And in between, there are lots of people that will tell you that there are rules. There are lots of people that will tell you that there is a way to do things. And some of them might be right, depending on the season of your life you find yourself in. My strong suggestion to you is that you only choose that and follow those systems that will lead to your long-term happiness. That's what I have for you all today. And to end this, speaking of happiness, I actually want to bring up a quick issue. If you've been enjoying these podcast episodes, then I want you to know that I'm not the one that makes myself sound this way. We have a wonderful podcast editor by the name of Josh, and Josh lives in Asheville. Some of you might be aware, but at this time, the time of recording this, which is October 2024, Asheville has been basically the victim of a natural disaster. There's been a hurricane, there's been flooding, and so many people have died. So many people have lost their homes. And Josh, our podcast editor, is one of those people. In fact, he was on a company meeting the other day sharing it with us. And he's an amazing human being. And I'm so grateful that he showed up to our meeting and he shared that, because I think in today's world, we are very desensitized from things that are happening. We're like, yeah, there's a war in Gaza. There's a war in Sudan. There's a genocide going on in the Congo. It's so easy to just move past those things. The war in Ukraine. There are a lot of crazy things happening, but it isn't until something happens to somebody that is close to us that we wake up. And so I told Josh while he shared in our meeting that this had happened to him. He was apologetic, because he was just like, I know you like your meetings to be positive, Jake. I just didn't mean to screw up the vibe. I told him absolutely not. We are a company that works in crises. We're a company that takes people's pain and shame and crises, and we do our best to help you out of that. So he brought awareness to the situation, and myself and the company have made donations to help people who have been displaced by the hurricane in Asheville. And I'm going to give Josh a couple of minutes to share and let you guys know, if you will listen, what is happening in Asheville and a few ways that you can help those who are impacted by it. This is a choice I am making, JK, am making, because I'm thankful to Josh for bringing this to my awareness and opening my heart up, because I was like, damn, I'm feeling this now. And I felt ashamed, really. I felt ashamed that as a human being, I was so disconnected from that, because I have been so selfish. There's some other moves we're going to be making, but I don't want to make this too long. So without further ado, we'll end the podcast with a word from my awesome editor, Josh.
Hello, my name is Josh Spencer, and I'm J.K. Amazy's audio engineer and podcast editor, and I am very, very proud to be so. Mr. Amazy was very gracious and allowed me to have the floor for just a few moments. I live in the city of Asheville, North Carolina. You may have heard on the news about the hurricane that devastated our beautiful mountain city. It's a miracle I'm even here today to talk to you about this, considering the destruction that I woke up to all around my home. I was lucky. Thousands of others were not. Thousands are still missing. Many lost everything they had and have become completely dependent upon the charity and donations of others. Our water supply is contaminated and our system is completely destroyed. I've heard estimates ranging from 2 to 8 weeks for repairs. If it happens within that time frame, it will be a miracle, and the vast majority of the rest of the city looks like a war zone. Elevated Recovery had a quarterly meeting recently, and I was unable to think of a win. but today I have several, and I would like to share them with you. First, volunteers from all over the country came to help us. There are supplies everywhere. I passed dozens of trucks completely full. That has saved us. We are so very grateful. We are so very grateful. Second, disaster relief organizations came to our aid and have been helping us put our lives back together all week. I would like to bring attention to a few of those, if I may. The first is Samaritan's Purse. There is a sea of people wearing orange shirts all over our city, signifying that they are volunteers from this organization. Their home office is in Boone, North Carolina. Their city was hit hard too, and they still came to rescue us without hesitation. Heart with Hands is located in Asheville, a few miles from where I live, also another amazing charity and disaster relief organization. And there's always the Red Cross. They've been around for over 100 years. There are churches accepting donations all over the city, helping to get money to those who need it. The church I, unfortunately, infrequently go to, called Hope Valley, is one of many. If I may quote Mr. Amazy for just a moment, "Brothers, I don't mean to get all woo-woo on you, but it's nothing short of a miracle that church is still there. Less than 10 feet in all directions around it is a pile of mangled shrapnel that used to be homes and businesses. The road going to it is barely traversable. It's hanging by a thread. For the animal lovers, Brother Wolf is a no-kill animal shelter that was completely destroyed. Hundreds of animals have been scattered all over the city in temporary homes. I currently have an adopted pet from them. I'm going to read something from the email they sent me on October the 4th, and I quote, "A generous donor has pledged to match all donations up to $500,000 starting tonight, doubling the impact of your contribution dollar for dollar. With your help, we can continue to save animals who have no one else coming for them." Links to these organizations will be in the show notes for any of you who are willing or if you are able to help in any way. Many of you have experienced the tragedies that I just described, and I honestly have no idea how you mentally recoup from it. And for those of you that believe this can't happen to you, you're wrong. The day before this hurricane hit, I thought it would be like the last 5 threats that we've had. Nothing. I thought, we're in the mountains, it will not reach us, we are too high elevation. Wrong. There is nowhere safe from these catastrophes anymore. And I am here today to tell you that I am ashamed that in years past when events like this happened to others, I didn't help. I didn't believe that I was in a good enough position to do so. Wrong. Never again. I will never look the other way again, hoping that someone else will step in and do it for me. Even if it's only a small donation, because they add up. Pennies add up. Thank you, Mr. Amazy, for allowing me to talk about this, and thank you so much for listening.
I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Porn Reboot podcast. I'll speak to you later on in the week. If you found this episode helpful, here are 4 ways I can help you with your out-of-control sexual behavior for free. The first way is to grab a free copy of my book, Confessions of a Porn Addict, 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men at elevatedrecovery.org, or visit the link in the description below this episode. The second way is, if you're not sure where to start, but you'd like to learn more about my team and I, if you'd like to spend time with like-minded professionals and business owners who are controlling their behavior, then join our free and confidential group, the Porn Reboot group on Facebook. There's a link to join in the description below this episode. The third way is if you need help right now because you have a burning issue, your behavior with pornography is hurting you mentally or emotionally, you're about to lose your relationship, you want to live up to your potential, be an authentic man, and free yourself from shame, guilt, and underachieving, then click on the link in the description below this episode that says free coaching call. And the fourth way is to leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy this podcast, so that we can reach more men who are struggling in silence and bring back the lessons we learn from coaching them to freedom.